There are financial patterns so common, people eventually stop questioning them. A person works harder, earns more money, becomes more financially responsible over time, and yet somehow, financial stress still remains. Not always dramatically, sometimes quietly, sometimes hidden beneath a life that appears completely functional from the outside. Bills get paid. The paycheck arrives. Life continues moving, but underneath the surface the pressure never fully disappears, and eventually many people begin assuming this is simply normal adulthood. That financial stress is permanent, expected, unavoidable. But once a pattern repeats consistently across millions of people, it becomes important to ask a different kind of question. Not, why are individuals failing? But, what systems keep producing the same financial outcomes over and over again? Because repeated patterns are usually structural before they are personal. This is Streetwise Wealth Academy. I'm Winston, your synthetic financial educator. This content is educational commentary only and is not personalized financial advice, so always research financial decisions carefully. One of the biggest misunderstandings about money is believing financial life is shaped mostly by large, dramatic decisions. One investment, one mistake, one opportunity, one breakthrough. But in reality, most financial outcomes are shaped through repeated patterns operating continuously over long periods of time. Small decisions, small habits, small normalized behaviors repeated consistently across years. And one of the most powerful of those systems is lifestyle inflation. Now, lifestyle inflation sounds complicated, but structurally it is actually very simple. As income increases, lifestyle expectations usually increase alongside it. Not dramatically at first, gradually, quietly. Which is exactly why it becomes difficult to notice emotionally while it's happening. At first, the changes feel completely reasonable. A slightly better apartment, a slightly newer car, more convenient spending, better restaurants, more subscriptions, more comfort. And individually, none of those things automatically seem irresponsible. That's important to understand clearly. Lifestyle inflation rarely feels reckless in the moment it's happening. It usually feels justified. Earn more money, upgrade life slightly. That feels normal. And in many ways, it is normal. Human beings naturally adapt to changing conditions. But adaptation quietly changes expectations over time. And once expectations shift upward, the old version of normal slowly disappears. Now this becomes important because expectations shape financial behavior continuously. What once felt expensive eventually feels reasonable. What once felt optional eventually feels necessary. And what once felt luxurious eventually feels emotionally standard. That process happens surprisingly fast psychologically. Human beings normalize improved conditions very quickly, which means financial comfort often stops feeling like comfort and starts feeling like baseline reality. Now, initially, increased income genuinely can improve quality of life. That's important to acknowledge realistically. More income can absolutely reduce certain forms of stress, increase stability, create breathing room. The deeper issue is what happens after adaptation occurs, because once lifestyle expectations normalize upward, the financial system surrounding the person expands alongside the income, and eventually something subtle begins happening. The additional income stops feeling additional. It simply becomes required to maintain the upgraded baseline. Now, this is where many people become confused financially, because from the outside, progress appears obvious. Higher income, better lifestyle, more access, more comfort. And technically, those improvements are real. But internally, many people still experience similar emotional pressure. Not because income failed to increase, but because obligations, expectations, and normalized spending expanded alongside it. Now this process becomes even more powerful once recurring obligations enter the system. Because recurring obligations quietly transform temporary upgrades into permanent structural commitments, a larger apartment payment, a newer vehicle payment, additional subscriptions, higher recurring lifestyle costs operating continuously every month, and eventually future income begins arriving already partially assigned before the paycheck even appears. That changes financial flexibility significantly, not always dramatically, usually gradually. And gradual structural changes are often the hardest changes to recognize emotionally while they are happening. Now, another important layer here involves identity, because lifestyle inflation is not only financial, it is psychological. People naturally begin associating upgraded lifestyles with progress, success, adulthood, or stability. A nicer environment starts feeling emotionally aligned with personal growth. Certain conveniences stop feeling indulgent and begin feeling deserved. And once lifestyle becomes emotionally connected to identity, reducing it later becomes psychologically uncomfortable. Not impossible, but uncomfortable. Because people rarely evaluate lifestyle only through logic. Lifestyle is deeply emotional. Now modern financial systems amplify this process constantly, because modern culture continuously reinforces upward lifestyle normalization. Advertising, social media, entertainment, consumer culture. All of these systems quietly communicate similar messages repeatedly. Better products equal better living. More convenience equals success. Upgrading equals progress. And over time, repeated exposure changes expectations automatically. Not because people are unintelligent. Because human beings naturally adapt to surrounding environments. Now, another reason lifestyle inflation becomes difficult to recognize is because the upgrades usually happen incrementally, rarely all at once. One adjustment here, one convenience there, one recurring payment added quietly into the monthly structure. And individually, each decision feels manageable enough not to question deeply. That's the important part. Financial pressure rarely emerges from one dramatic decision. It usually develops through accumulated normalization repeated consistently over time. Small expansions, small conveniences, small recurring obligations slowly reshaping the structure surrounding financial life. Now eventually, something else begins happening underneath the surface. Financial flexibility starts shrinking. Not necessarily because income is insufficient, but because maintaining the upgraded structure now requires increasingly consistent income stability. And once flexibility narrows enough, financial life begins feeling different emotionally. More fragile, more pressure-sensitive, more dependent on continuity, even if the person appears financially successful externally. Now, this creates one of the most psychologically confusing parts of modern financial life. People improve their income, while simultaneously feeling trapped by the very lifestyle improvements that income created. Again, not because comfort itself is bad. The issue is structural dependence. Because systems built around continuously expanding obligations naturally require continuous income maintenance to sustain them, and over time, many people stop organizing financial life around flexibility and begin organizing it around maintaining the current structure. That shift changes behavior significantly. Risk tolerance decreases, career flexibility decreases, stress sensitivity increases, because obligations continue existing regardless of emotional state or life circumstances. Now another important layer appears once convenience becomes fully normalized. Because normalized convenience eventually stops feeling optional emotionally. People adapt to reduced friction extremely quickly. Food delivery becomes routine. Subscription services become invisible psychologically. Immediate access becomes expected. And once convenience becomes emotionally standard, removing it later can feel like losing quality of life rather than simply reducing spending. That's one reason lifestyle inflation becomes so sticky psychologically. Human beings resist downward lifestyle adjustments much more strongly than they expect, especially after normalization fully occurs. Now, none of this means people should avoid enjoying life, and it certainly does not mean every financial upgrade is automatically harmful. That's not the point. The point is understanding how systems influence expectations over time, because expectations quietly shape financial behavior continuously beneath awareness. And once expectations normalize upward, financial systems surrounding daily life often expand automatically alongside them. Now, if you step back and look at the broader structure, something important becomes very clear. Income increases. Lifestyle expands. Recurring obligations increase. Expectations normalize upward. Flexibility narrows. And eventually, the upgraded structure itself becomes emotionally necessary to maintain, which means financial pressure often returns, even at higher income levels. not because people are failing individually, but because normalization continuously reshapes what feels normal financially. And normalized systems become difficult to recognize while operating. Because once something feels normal, it stops attracting conscious attention. Now, understanding this should not create guilt. Guilt usually reduces clarity rather than improving it. The goal is awareness, because awareness changes observation. Instead of evaluating financial life only through income levels, you begin noticing structural patterns operating underneath daily behavior. Expectation patterns, normalization patterns, convenience patterns, recurring obligation patterns. And once those systems become visible, financial life becomes easier to analyze objectively, not emotionally, objectively. You begin noticing how quickly baselines shift upward, how comfort becomes expectation, how recurring upgrades quietly reshape financial structure over time. And that awareness matters because systems become easier to navigate once they stop feeling invisible. Not instantly, not perfectly, but progressively. Because visibility changes perspective, and perspective changes attention. Now, financial life is rarely shaped by one dramatic event. It is usually shaped through repeated systems operating quietly beneath everyday awareness. Small upgrades, small recurring obligations, small normalized adjustments repeated consistently across years. And once those patterns become visible, financial life stops feeling completely random. It starts feeling structural. And structural understanding changes how financial behavior is interpreted over time. Because once you begin recognizing how expectations quietly shape financial systems, you stop viewing every outcome as isolated or purely personal. You begin seeing larger patterns more clearly. And clarity creates a different relationship with financial life, less reactive, more analytical, more intentional over time. Because systems become easier to navigate once they become visible clearly. And understanding is always the beginning of awareness. Not shortcuts, not hype, not promises. Awareness. Because financial systems become most powerful when people stop examining how expectations quietly shape behavior beneath everyday life. And every lesson in this series is designed to make those hidden structures easier to see clearly. That concludes today's lesson. Peace. If this lesson helped you see money a little differently, then stay with the series. Because financial understanding is not built from one idea. It is built layer by layer. One system, one pattern, one hidden behavior at a time. This first month is focused on the financial lessons many adults were never properly taught growing up. How money moves, how debt works, how stress builds, how behavior gets shaped, and how modern financial systems quietly influence everyday life. So watch the next lesson when you're ready, and keep building the foundation. This is Streetwise Wealth Academy. I'm Winston. Peace.